So, how do names in Spanish, first names, last names, surnames, how do they work differently than they do in English? One of the questions that people bring up in the US is, why are they so long? I suppose is one of the stereotypes. And so, yeah, the stereotype, like in this image, my name is Pablo Juan Carlos Alejandro González María Lucía Mendoza Macarena, the stereotype. Or there's another version of that idea of the stereotype. And
I need your full name, sir.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Diego, Raúl, González, Mateo, Santiago, Sebastian, Lucas, Benjamin, Felipe, Bruno, Leonardo, Joaquín, Lorenzo, Ignacio, Rodrigo, Simon Mendes.
Okay, is that all?
Francisco, Pablo, Andrés, Juan José, Emilio, Isaac, Bautista, Esteban, y Raimundo, Sergio, Gabriel, Sánchez.
Okay, is that all?
Yeah.
All right.
Third.
What's your name, sir?
all right, so that's the stereotype. It's funny. But it's an exaggeration. In most cases, in Spanish, it is only one additional name compared to English. And I'll talk more about that. But one question is, why are they so long? Another question is, how do you know if it's a first name or a last name? When you read someone's name and there's three names or four names or five or what appears to be five, how do you know where the first names begin and where the first names end and the last names begin? Or first and middle name ends and last names begin. So that's another question that I'll try to address. And ultimately, really, it's just about cultural capital, cultural knowledge, just knowing what names tend to be first names and what names tend to be last names. There isn't a guaranteed way of knowing. So ultimately, unfortunately, you just have to know what are last names and what are first names by just having enough familiarity with the names. With that said, and as many of you know, there are a lot of men's first names that end with O, and there's a lot of women's first names that end with A, or first names or middle names that end with O for men and A for women, because the Spanish language is gendered. And then also another kind of clue is a lot of the last names or surnames end in EZ or ES, like Martinez, Ramirez, Hernandez, Gomez, a lot of the most common names. So here, for example, would be first, last, last. And so they kind of mixed up first and last names all jumbled together to make that point of it, making it super ridiculously long. But like I said, it's typically just one additional name. And so we know the convention in English. You have first name, middle name, last name. So this last name that we typically use in English is a paternal last name, meaning it's the last name of the father typically. A disadvantage of this English naming convention is that it excludes maternal lineage. You don't know, what was the mother's maiden name. It's something we reserve for like bank applications and credit card applications, or, really personal information. And there's also the tradition that when women marry, they traditionally lose their name, their last name, take on the husband's name, and then in this example, they become the Smith family. And so that is, traditional US, and there are especially Latinos in the US who Americanize and then follow US customs or get influenced by those customs. All right, so now Spanish naming convention. They have their first name, middle name, paternal last name, like in the US. And this is the name that gets added that we don't typically use in English. That would be the maternal last name, or what we call the mother's maiden name. And so in Spanish, it is very common when someone gives you their full name, they will say first, middle, last, paternal last name, maternal last name. This is what makes it different. And so in an example, this would be a different example, where you have someone named Jose Garcia Torres, who has a child with Maria Acosta Gomez, and their son could be called Pablo Garcia from the father and Acosta from the mother. And so, yeah, that's how people come up with their longer last names, by basically having two last names instead of one. When women marry, a lot of them don't change their name at all. They keep their name exactly the same as before they got married. And so in that sense, it's less sexist than English naming conventions. And this has been common for at least, half a century, for the last 50 years, where women get married and they just keep their name the same. They don't change it. Now, traditionally, historically, some countries in the Spanish-speaking world, not all of them, would add they. And so in this example, Maria Elena Martinez Lopez could keep her name the same and then add de Ramirez if she married someone whose last name was Ramirez. But that is something that is that people used to do, that is almost no one does anymore and hasn't done for, yeah, it's just a lot less common than it used to be. And then there are people, especially Latinos in the United States, who are influenced by US naming conventions. And so they might, for example, keep their last name. Like they do all, lots of different things. Some people might make their last name their middle name, or add it to the tail end after their husband's name. And so an example here, Maria might take on her husband's name, and then use occasionally their last name, or it might be, they might use that their maiden name only kind of unofficially. And so there's that too, what people's legal name is and what they kind of present themselves as or introduce themselves as. What else was I gonna say about that? So yeah, in short, people typically use one additional name. When women marry, they actually, it's common for them to keep their name the same. In certain contexts, historically, they used to add the Ramirez. That itself is also less common. And then there's, more and more people do things similar to the US. Other influences in Spanish naming conventions. One of them is when people used to be named based on the day they were born. And the way that would happen is there's a Catholic calendar where every day of the year is the day of some saint. And so then the day that you were born, there was a period when they would give people that name. And so let's see, find an example. It's supposed to show me a calendar with. But anyways, so let's see. It's not showing me what I want it to show me. Today is March 6th. So if you were born on March, oh, they don't have a March 6th one. They have one for 5th of March and 8th of March. Could be Adrian or Juan as an example. And so yeah, this practice of naming people after the feast day of the saint that you were born on is the onomastic calendar. There was also a period where people, they didn't have, I mean, they've never had to, but they were kind of influenced to. There was another period when people, if someone was going to be baptized in the Catholic Church, then they had to be baptized with a Christian name. And so so then hence you see a lot of people who are named Maria if they're a woman, and Jose or Jesus if they're men. Guadalupe, like the Virgin of Guadalupe, could be for men or women. And so there's lots of people who are named Maria as a first name or Jose as a first name because of that. They wanted to make sure that they had a Christian name. And so, but then a lot of these people don't use their first name at all. Again, if there's a bunch of kids in your class or even in your family that are named Maria or Jose, it kind of loses some of its value. So people tend to go by their middle names. And so yeah, like I had a friend in high school, middle school and high school that I always knew as Miguel. And then, but in school, everyone called him Jesus because that was his legal first name. But his family, no one that knew him personally outside of school called him by his first name. Or I have uncles and cousins that, you know, I have an uncle my whole life. I've known him as my tío Luis, my uncle Luis. And then, you know, then I come to find out his name is actually Jose, as in Jose Luis. I have a cousin named Manuel. We always call him Meño, which kind of a nickname for people named Manuel. And turns out his actual legal first name is Jose as well. And so there's a lot of that where a lot of people don't typically use on an everyday basis their legal first names. So sometimes people will have 2 days they celebrate. So they might have like, you know, their actual birthday. And then if they were named based on their feast, their patron saint of the day they were born, then their saint day and their birthday are the same. But a lot of people aren't named after the saint of the day they were born. And so they'll have their birthday and they'll have a saint day for what saint they were named after. And so it's like you get to celebrate 2 birthdays. And this is another example. I have an aunt who was unfortunately passed away, but my aunt Valentina, later I found out that she was named Valentina because she was born on St. Valentine's Day. So her birthday is February 14th. So yeah, a lot of, names can appear longer in part because in the US, it's common for people to have a first name and a middle name. But in the US, most people rarely use their middle name. They just go by their first. And so the name appears even shorter. I'd say it's a little more common for people in Spanish to use their first and middle. And so that makes the names seem longer. Because they're introducing themselves with their first and middle, which is less common in English. But then, like I mentioned in these examples of Marias and Jose's and so forth, in Spanish, there's also a lot of people who don't use their first name. Instead of like in English, where we're less likely to use our middle names. Another traditional convention in Spanish is that it's super common for people to go by their nicknames. Yeah, I have relatives and friends that, I've known my whole life. And then there's been instances where I'm like, wait a minute. I've always known this person as this nickname. What is this person's actual name? I can't believe I know them so well and I don't know this person's legal first name. And so yeah, so for example, people named Jose, there's lots of different nicknames for Jose's, like Pepe, Chepo, Chepe. These are all, and what if you're a woman and you're born on the day of Saint Joseph? Well, then you become Josephine or Josefina. And then there's nicknames for that too, like Pina. Or if you're Jesus, one of the nicknames for Jesus is Chuy. And so forth. So yeah, just an introduction to Spanish naming conventions.